The morning was quiet when Ethan Cole drove his black car through the narrow road that led to Greenfield Cemetery. The sun had just started to rise behind a thin cover of clouds, filling the sky with a soft orange light. A quiet wind moved through the leaves, and faint sounds of birds filled the air. Ethan kept his eyes straight ahead. He had come alone, as he always did on this day. He did not like anyone seeing him when he visited this place. The world called him a billionaire, a clever business mind, a man who built everything he ever wanted, but in truth he felt empty every time he came here. He parked near the old oak tree, turned off the engine, and sat silently for a moment. The weight of his heart pressed against him. His wife Lily had been gone for 3 years, yet her face still came to his mind every night before he slept. She had been pure kindness, calm but full of laughter, someone who could make an ordinary day feel warm. The disease that took her had moved fast, leaving him helpless. He had built companies, created systems, solved problems others called impossible, but he could not save her. That defeat was the one his heart never recovered from. Ethan stepped out of the car and picked a bunch of white lilies from the back seat. He had bought them that morning from the same small flower shop Lily used to like. The woman there always kept the flowers ready for him, saying in a kind tone, "One day at a time, Mr. Cole." He would only nod without speaking much. Words about comfort no longer worked on him. He preferred quiet. Quiet was the only space that did not judge. He walked along the narrow path between the rows of graves. The grass was wet from the night rain, and his shoes made a soft sound on the earth. His heart slowed as he came near Lily's resting place. Her name was written in gentle letters on white marble, and beneath it were the words "Forever in Bloom." He had not understood her then. Those words struck him harder than ever. He kneeled slowly, brushed away a few fallen leaves, and placed the flowers just above her name. For a moment he stayed still, his vision blurry as he looked at the dates on the stone. The wind touched his face, carrying the faint smell of rain mixed with earth. His chest felt tight. He whispered softly as if she could still hear him. "I am trying, Lily, but it is still hard. I should be stronger, right? You always said I could manage anything." He smiled faintly, but his eyes filled with tears. Then he noticed something unusual nearby. Just one row away, someone else was sitting on the grass beside another grave. It was a girl, maybe in her early 20s. She wore an old blue cardigan and torn shoes. Her long hair was messy, and she was crying in silence. Her hands were clasped together, and her shoulders shook a little. Ethan looked away at first. He did not want to intrude on someone's grief. But the sound of her quiet sobs kept drawing his attention back. Something in her sadness felt strangely familiar. The girl reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of folded paper. She opened it, stared at it for a long moment, then pressed it to her lips and whispered something that Ethan could not hear. Her lips trembled as if she was speaking to someone lost, someone she cared for deeply. The wind carried a few of her words, though they broke halfway. All Ethan caught was a soft "I'm sorry," followed by a quiet sniff. His chest tightened again, though he could not say why. The feeling of guilt in her voice stirred an old ache in him. He told himself to walk away. It was not his place to stand there and listen. But something in the way she cried did not let him move. It was raw and innocent. It was the kind of pain that did not come from losing money or fame, but from losing love. The same pain he had carried for years. He looked toward Lily's grave again, wondering if this meeting was only coincidence or fate playing strange games. The girl suddenly stood, wiping her eyes roughly with her sleeve. She turned slightly, and for a brief second their eyes met. Hers were brown, tired, and filled with tears, but there was something deep in them, something Ethan could not name. She looked away quickly, gathered her bag, and turned to leave. As she moved, a small folded paper slipped from her hands and fell to the ground. Ethan noticed it landed near his shoes. Before he could call out to her, she had already started walking down the path and vanished behind the trees. Ethan bent down and picked up the fallen paper. It was a letter, old and faint, the writing soft but still clear enough to read. His heart almost stopped when he noticed the signature at the bottom. It was written in a careful, familiar hand that he could recognize anywhere. It was Lily's. Ethan stood frozen under the gray sky, the old letter trembling in his hand. The paper was thin and slightly yellow. The ink faded but still clear enough for him to read parts of it. His name was nowhere on it, yet the words sounded like Lily. They carried her gentleness, her kindness, that quiet way she always spoke when she wanted to comfort someone. At the bottom of the page, the signature read simply, Lily. For a moment he thought it was some strange mistake, a coincidence of names, but his heart refused to believe it. He knew his wife's handwriting better than anyone. It was hers. He looked down the path where the crying girl had gone, but could no longer see her. His mind raced. Who was she? Why did she have a letter from Lily? He folded the paper carefully and placed it in his coat pocket, then turned toward his car. The memory of the girl's tearful face stayed in his thoughts all the way back to the city. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study. The house around him was silent, except for the soft ticking of an old clock on the wall. He unfolded the letter again and began reading every word slowly. The letter was dated 5 years ago. Lily had written it to someone named Nora. The letter spoke about hope and second chances. Lily had written that pain could make a person strong, that darkness never lasted forever, and that the world always gave us one more sunrise. Ethan felt a sharp pull inside his chest as he read. This was not the kind of letter his wife would send to a friend or family member. It sounded like a letter from a mentor to someone who needed guidance. He kept reading until the end, where Lily had added a short line that made his breath catch. She had written, When you find your path again, don't look back in fear. I believe in you, always. Ethan closed his eyes. Lily had always believed that kindness mattered more than anything. She had run a small community program for troubled youth, writing letters to those who asked for help. Maybe this Nora had been one of them. The next morning, Ethan called his assistant and asked her to find any records connected to the outreach program Lily had started. Within hours, she sent him several old files. Lists of young people who had once written letters to Lily. Among the names, there it was. Nora Evans, once registered under City Youth Center. Age 16 at the time. She had been a runaway girl who was offered support and study help through the program. Ethan stared at the file for a long minute. He felt something shift inside him. Lily had helped this girl years ago, and somehow that letter had found its way back to her grave. He looked up the address listed in the file, an older part of town near the riverside. That afternoon, he drove there. The area was poor, with small houses lined close together and children playing on cracked sidewalks. He parked quietly and walked until he found the number that matched the file. It was a small building with peeling paint. Before he could knock, the door opened and the girl from the cemetery stepped outside. She froze when she saw him. Her eyes widened. You were at the cemetery," she said in a shaky voice. "Yes," Ethan replied softly. "I think you dropped this." He held out the letter. She took a step forward and stared at the familiar paper. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time her face showed surprise more than sadness. "You read it?" she asked. "I did," Ethan admitted. "It was my wife's handwriting. Lily Cole was my wife." Nora pressed her lips together, her hands trembling as she held the letter close to her chest. "I didn't know her last name," she whispered. "I only knew her as Miss Lily. She helped me when I was living on the streets. She wrote me letters, told me not to give up. When I finally got my life together, I wanted to thank her, but when I tried to find her, found out she had passed away." Ethan listened quietly. Something gentle stirred in him. For years he had wondered if Lily's kindness had really changed anyone's life. Now he was standing in front of living proof. "She would be happy to see you now," Ethan said. Nora gave a small smile, her eyes still wet. "I wish I could tell her that she saved me. I would not be here without her words." For a long moment they both stood silently around them. Cars passed slowly and birds flew over the rooftops. Ethan felt the ache in his heart soften a little. "Can we talk somewhere?" he asked. "I want to know more about how she helped you." Nora nodded and pointed to a small cafe on the corner. Inside, they sat by the window. The smell of coffee filled the air. Nora told him everything. She had met Lily through letters when she was 16 and lost. Lily had sent simple words that gave her courage to go back to school. Nora said every line of those letters had felt like sunlight. Ethan listened, time seeming to stop around them. When she finished, he looked down at the table, then back at her. "Maybe she wanted me to find you," he said quietly. Nora looked at him with wonder. "Maybe she wanted both of us to heal," she said. Their eyes met again, and neither of them spoke for several minutes, as if Lily's spirit was still there, binding them in unseen threads of compassion that neither fame nor sorrow could ever break. The gentle sound of raindrops touching the cafe window filled the quiet space between Ethan and Nora. He sat across from her, his dark coat still damp at the edges, his expression thoughtful. The weight of years seemed to rest on his face, yet behind his calm eyes there was warmth that had not been there for a long time. Nora stirred her tea slowly, tracing her finger along the rim of the cup, unsure of what to say next. It felt strange to be sitting with the husband of the woman who had once saved her. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but steady. "Lily was kind to me when no one else cared," she said. "I was living behind a grocery store then. I had nothing. I didn't trust anyone. One day, someone told me I could write to a volunteer who listened to kids like me. I wrote a letter, and somehow it reached her." Ethan leaned forward, wanting to hear every word. "She never told me about you," he said quietly. "I think she wanted to protect your privacy. She just asked me to promise one thing," Nora said. "I asked me to try. She said no matter how many times I failed, I had to keep trying. She sent me letters now and then. They were always written in her careful handwriting, the same as this one. I didn't know she was important or rich. I only knew she was honest." Ethan looked down, thinking of the nights when Lily would sit at her desk, her face soft in the yellow light of the lamp, writing letters. He used to tease her for spending so much time on them. She would smile and say, "These are my quiet victories." Now he finally understood what she meant. "Tell me what happened after," Ethan said. "I got a job at a bakery," Nora replied. "It wasn't much, but it helped me eat and save a little. Years later, when I could stand on my own, I wanted to meet her. I went to the address she once wrote, but they told me she wasn't there anymore. Then I learned she had passed away. I felt like a part of me closed forever. So I started visiting her grave. It made me feel like I had some place to say thank you." Ethan listened to her simple words, and each one hit him deep inside. He realized Lily had continued giving life to others even when she was losing her own. The thought filled him with pride and sadness all at once. He studied the girl in front of him. Her clothes were worn, her hands rough, but there was strength in her that didn't come from money or power. It came from fighting through darkness. "You have come a long way," Ethan said. She would be proud. Nora blinked quickly, hiding more tears. "I'm still trying to be someone she'd like. Sometimes I still hear her voice in my head when I want to give up." They talked for hours. The cafe owner refilled their drinks without a word. People came and went, umbrellas dripping near the door. As time passed, Ethan began to feel something shift inside him. He had spent years locked behind walls of work, meetings, and silence. But with Nora, there was no pity or pretense. She spoke without fear of who he was. She spoke about Lily's words, as if they were living things. That feeling made him remember how it felt to breathe freely. When they left the cafe, the rain had stopped and the sunset painted the streets gold. Nora walked beside him quietly as they reached his car. She hesitated as he unlocked the door. "You don't have to do anything for me," she said. "I know some people think I came to you for money, but I swear I didn't." Ethan shook his head. "I don't think that. I only want to know more about what Lily meant to you." She smiled softly. She meant hope. Those two words stayed with him the rest of the night. When he reached his home, he placed Lily's photo on the table and set the letter beside it. He thought about the strange way life had led him to that meeting. He looked out the window and saw the city lights below, each one glowing like a quiet wish. For the first time since Lily's death, he felt a sense of purpose rising again. In the following days, Ethan visited the foundation that Lily had started. He had not gone there for years. Staff was surprised to see him. He walked through the hallways filled with photos of youths whom the program had helped. Among the smiling faces on the wall, he noticed one he recognized. It was Nora, much younger, standing with a group of volunteers, her eyes still shy, but with a spark of life. He took a long breath. There in that photograph, he saw Lily's dream alive. She had always said that real wealth was measured not in what you kept, but in what you gave. He finally believed her. That night he wrote a small note and placed it under the frame of Lily's picture. It said simply, "I met her, Lily. She found her way. Maybe I'm finding mine too." Far across the city, Nora stood outside the bakery where she now worked. She pulled Lily's old letter from her pocket and smiled at the gentle handwriting. A soft peace filled her heart. For the first time in years, she felt that she was not alone in the world anymore. Ethan began visiting the community center again after meeting Nora. The place was small, but full of energy and hope. Children played in one corner, while a teacher read stories aloud. On one wall, painted words read, "Kind hearts build bright futures." They were Lily's words. Ethan stood there, letting the memories come back, the ones he had locked away after her death. He used to drop her off here and wait in the car while she worked with the children. He never bothered to go inside before. Now he wished he had. Nora helped at the center whenever she was free from her bakery job. Ethan often saw her kneeling with the children, helping them draw or read. Sometimes she would laugh, a light sound that reminded him of Lily's laugh in some impossible way. Watching her lifted something inside him. He began to help quietly too, fixing broken shelves, repairing old computers, buying supplies. He told no one that he was the donor behind it. He did not do it for praise. He did it because he felt Lily's spirit smiling through every small act of kindness that happened there. Days turned into weeks. Ethan and Nora often met at the center, or sometimes at the same cafe where they had first spoken. Their conversations grew easier. She told him about her life, about the struggles she still faced, about her dreams of opening a small bakery of her own one day. Ethan listened with real interest, asking questions, and sometimes offering gentle advice. He spoke more freely, too, telling her stories about Lily, about their early days together before his company became famous, and how Lily had always kept him grounded. He noticed that when he spoke of Lily now, he no longer broke down inside. Nora's presence made the memories feel like warm sunlight instead of cold pain. One evening, as they closed the center together, the lights flickered off one by one. They stood near the doorway while rain began to fall outside again. Nora held her small umbrella and looked up at him with a shy smile. "Hey, you don't have to walk me home," she said. "Maybe I just need the walk myself," he replied, with a lighter tone than she had ever heard from him before. They walked side by side down the wet street. City lights reflected on the puddles around their feet. The sound of the rain softened the world to a peaceful rhythm. Ethan found himself speaking about Lily's last months, something he had never told anyone. He told Nora how Lily spent those months writing letters to people she had never met, believing that if she could send out kindness before she left, it would keep spreading after her. "I did not understand then," Ethan said quietly. "I thought she was trying to escape reality. Now I see she was leaving pieces of herself behind for people like you to find." Nora's eyes glistened under the streetlight. "She did not just save me. She changed how I see people. I used to think the world was mean and unfair. Now I try to see good in everyone, even when it is hard." Ethan nodded and looked up at the night sky. "She would be glad you said that. You remind me of her in more ways than you know." Nora blushed softly, but did not reply. They continued walking in silence until they reached her small building. Before she went inside, she turned to him. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were sad because you had lost everything. But now I see you're finding reasons to smile again. Maybe that means you're healing." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe you're part of that reason." Her face turned pink again, and she looked down. "Then we're both helping each other, I suppose." She waved and ran up the steps. Ethan watched her go, feeling a quiet warmth that stayed with him until he returned home. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself thinking about Nora often. He did not know if it was affection, gratitude, or something deeper. All he knew was that being around her made him feel alive again. He started visiting the foundation, not just for work, but to spend time near her energy. He watched how she handled people kindly, patiently, without expecting anything in return. She carried the same selfless heart Lily had once carried. One afternoon, Nora baked a small cake and brought it to him at the center. "It's not perfect," she said nervously, "but I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for the children." Ethan tried a piece and smiled genuinely. "It's good. You have talent. You should start that bakery you dream about." "Maybe one day," she said. "Right now, I just want to keep this place running. It means a lot to me." He looked at her with admiration. "You remind me that goodness still exists in this world." For a moment, their eyes met, and both felt a strange sense of peace mixed with something neither could name. It was not love in the usual way. It was more like a bond of two souls drawn together by another soul that had once loved them both. Weeks later, the center organized a small charity event in Lily's memory. Children danced, people laughed, and the air was filled with joy. Ethan stood beside Nora as the crowd clapped and cheered. She turned to him and said softly, "I think she would be proud of this." Ethan nodded. "She would be proud of you." As the music played and laughter rose through the evening air, Ethan felt as though Lily's spirit was all around them, not as a ghost of the past, but as a quiet light that had led both him and Nora out of darkness, towards something that felt like life beginning again. Several months passed, and life began to change for both Ethan and Nora. The foundation grew stronger, filled with new volunteers and smiling children. Ethan made sure it had everything it needed, but stayed away from the spotlight. He wanted Lily's name to be at the front, not his. Nora worked harder than anyone, often staying late to clean or help a child with homework. The center had become her second home, and Ethan found himself walking there more often than he expected, just to see the life and warmth that filled its walls. The winter sun came late and left early. One cold afternoon, Ethan received an old envelope at his office. The paper was addressed in a handwriting he did not know. When he opened it, he found a note written by one of Lily's former volunteers. The woman thanked Ethan for keeping Lily's dream alive, and mentioned how happy she was to hear that a young woman named Nora was taking part in the work. At the end of the letter, the woman wrote, "Lily once said to me, 'Kindness will always find the ones who need each other.' It seems that this has happened one more time." Ethan sat back in his chair and let the words sink into him. Later that evening, he drove to Greenfield Cemetery. The air was sharp, and the ground was covered in light snow. He walked the familiar path to Lily's grave, the same path he had walked every year, but this time his heart felt different. He was not drowning in grief. He was calm. As he stood there, he saw someone kneeling by the same place. Her scarf was red, and the breeze moved her hair gently. He recognized her before she even turned. It was Nora. She looked up, surprised but not startled. "I guess we both came at the same time again," she said with a faint smile. Ethan nodded. "This place always brings me peace," he replied. "I did not plan to come today, but something told me I should." Nora placed a small bouquet of fresh daisies at Lily's grave. She whispered something softly, her voice carried by the gentle wind. Then she looked at Ethan. "I was thanking her," she said.
Oh.
"For everything. Not just for helping me before, but for bringing you into my path. I think she wanted us to meet." Ethan's throat tightened. "Why do you think that?" he asked. "'Cause she helped people find light," Nora said. "Maybe she knew you would need someone to remind you how to live again, and maybe she knew I would need someone to believe in me. I think she tied us together in her own way." Ethan stared at the simple marble stone and felt tears press behind his eyes. There was truth in Nora's words. Lily's kindness had stretched beyond time and had reached both of them. He took a slow breath and said, "You're right. Maybe she wanted me to pass on what she gave me." Nora smiled warmly. "She did. And you are doing it." They stood quietly for a long moment, side by side. The air was cold, but the silence between them felt gentle, not heavy. Ethan thought of how far they had come. A few months ago, he could hardly bear to visit this place. Now standing here felt like closing a circle in peace. Nora looked down at the snow and spoke softly. "You know, I used to ask her in my prayers to send me strength. Now I don't ask that anymore. I thank her instead, because I think she gave me you as my answer." Ethan looked at her face. There was no hesitation in her words, only honest feeling. He stepped closer and placed a hand over hers. "She gave us both a second chance," he said. "Not to forget, but to live again." Nora nodded, her eyes shining. "That's what love is, isn't it? Not ending, just changing into something new." Ethan felt a quiet smile spread across his face. Yes. Love never ends. It only keeps moving to where it's needed most. Together, they stayed until the sky turned pink with the fading sun. When they finally walked away from the grave, the sound of their steps blended softly with the whisper of the wind through the trees. The world around them seemed calm and full of grace. Weeks later, Ethan supported Nora in opening her own little bakery near the foundation. It was small but welcoming. Children from the center often came by after school, their laughter filling the space. On one of the walls hung a small framed photo of Lily with the words, "Kindness never dies." Every time Ethan and Nora looked at it, they felt that same peaceful warmth again. People in town soon learned that the bakery gave free bread to anyone who could not pay. When the local newspaper asked Nora why she did it, she smiled and said, "Someone once taught me that helping others keeps love alive." Ethan watched her from the doorway that day, proud and thankful. He knew Lily's spirit lived among them in every smile, every loaf of bread, every kind act that passed quietly between hearts. The pain that had once ruled his life had turned into purpose. As the sun set behind the city, he closed the bakery door beside Nora and looked out at the glowing sky. "Lily would be proud," he said. "She already knows," Nora replied. They both stood there in silence, the golden light touching their faces, bound not only by memory, but by a love that was born from loss and had turned into something timeless and beautiful.